Jake Miller sat in his office on the council station, reading the same message for the third time. The words had not changed. The answer was still no. After 2 years of requests, the Galactic Council had again refused to grant humans access to the main trade routes. He set down the datapad and looked out the window at the massive space station that housed the council chambers. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went constantly. Sleek Voss vessels with their silver hulls. Ancient Cathari warships that looked like floating temples. Trading ships from the Zilani Federation loaded with goods from across the galaxy, but no human ships. They were not welcome here. Jake had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 5 years. In that time, he had watched the other species treat humanity like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. The council members smiled politely when he spoke, then ignored everything he said. The door chimed, and his assistant, Carol Davis, entered with another stack of documents. "More rejections?" she said, setting them on his desk. "The mining permit for the outer reach was denied. So was the research station proposal for the beta sector." Jake nodded. He was not surprised. The council had been denying human requests for expansion for months now. They always had good reasons. The areas were too dangerous. Other species had prior claims. Humans lacked the proper experience. "There's something else?" Carol said. She looked nervous. "I got a message from Dr. Alex Turner. He wants to see you. He said it was urgent." Jake knew Alex well. They had worked together on several colonial projects. Alex ran the Colonial Development Initiative, which helped establish new human settlements on frontier worlds. If Alex said something was urgent, it usually was an hour later. Jake met Alex at a small cafe in the civilian section of the station. Alex was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years helping humans build new homes on distant worlds. Today he looked older than his 60 years. "We need to talk," Alex said quietly. "Somewhere private." They walked to an observation deck that was usually empty during this shift. Through the transparent walls, they could see the vast emptiness of space and the distant glow of stars. "The council is never going to accept us," Alex said without introduction. "You know it, I know it. Everyone knows it except the politicians back on Earth who keep telling us to be patient." Jake said nothing. He had reached the same conclusion months ago, but hearing someone else say it made it real. "I have been talking to people," Alex continued. "Colony administrators. Ship captains, scientists, engineers, people who actually do the work of keeping human civilization running out here in the frontier." "What kind of talking?" Alex was quiet for a moment. "The kind where we stop asking for permission and start taking care of ourselves." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Alex, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it is time to stop begging the council for scraps. Maybe it is time to find our own way." Before Jake could respond, Alex handed him a small data chip. "This contains a list of names. People who are tired of being treated like second-class citizens. People who are ready to do something about it." Jake looked at the chip. "Do something like what?" "Like leaving, quietly, with dignity. Let the council keep their precious trade routes. We will find our own." The idea was shocking, but Jake found himself considering it. How many more years would they spend asking for basic rights? How many more times would the council pat them on the head and tell them to wait their turn? "The colonies in the rim sectors are already mostly self-sufficient," Alex said. "They have to be. The council does not care what happens out there as long as we stay quiet and do not bother them. Most of those worlds could survive without any support from council space." Jake thought about the human colonies he had visited. They were tough places, settled by tough people. Farmers who could grow food on worlds that other species considered dead rock. Engineers who could build cities in environments that would kill most aliens. Miners who worked in conditions too dangerous for anyone else. "You were talking about abandoning everything humans have built in council space," Jake said. "I'm talking about taking it with us," Alex replied. "Our people, our knowledge, our skills. Everything that actually matters." Over the next few weeks, Jake found himself thinking about Alex's words. He attended council sessions where human concerns were brushed aside or ignored entirely. He watched Zexthal, the Cathari representative, openly laugh when Jake raised questions about discriminatory trade policies. The Voss delegate, Morgeth, was more polite but equally dismissive. She spoke to Jake the way an adult might speak to a child asking too many questions. Patient but condescending, during one particularly frustrating session, Jake realized that nothing he said mattered to these beings. They had already decided that humans were not important. Nothing would change their minds. That evening, Jake accessed the data chip Alex had given him. The list of names was longer than he had expected. Colony governors, ship captains, scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, people from every level of human society in the frontier regions. He recognized many of the names. Lisa Hayes, who commanded cargo ships that supplied the outer colonies. Ben Ross, who ran security for mining operations in dangerous sectors. Mary Johnson, the engineer who had designed power systems for half the installations in the rim sectors. These were not angry revolutionaries or political extremists. They were ordinary people who had grown tired of being treated with disrespect. Jake made his decision the next morning. He sent a coded message to Alex Turner. 2 words, count me in. The plan began to unfold slowly and carefully. There were no grand announcements or angry speeches, no demands or ultimatums. Just quiet preparation. Lisa Hayes began adjusting her shipping routes. Instead of bringing supplies from council space to the colonies, she started moving resources between the human settlements themselves. Other ship captains followed her example. Ben Ross started pulling security teams back from the most remote mining operations. Officially, it was for equipment maintenance and personnel rotation. In reality, he was consolidating human forces in preparation for withdrawal. Dr. Tony Clark, who worked at the Interspecies Technology Institute, began copying research data that humans had contributed to joint projects. The work belonged to humanity as much as anyone else, but he knew the council would try to keep it if they suspected what was coming. Mary Johnson started training local technicians to maintain the systems she had built. She told her supervisors it was part of a new efficiency initiative. She did not mention that the training would allow human colonies to operate independently of council infrastructure. Kate Adams, who coordinated civilian affairs for the colonial administration, began what she called a population census. In reality, she was identifying which humans wanted to stay in council space and which were ready to leave. The answer surprised everyone. Nearly 90% of humans in the frontier regions wanted to join the exodus. They were tired of being second-class citizens in their own galaxy. As the weeks passed, the preparations continued. Supply ships quietly stockpiled resources at hidden locations. Research data was copied and secured. Personnel were reassigned to positions that would make the transition easier. Through it all, Jake continued his duties as ambassador. He attended council meetings and made the expected speeches about cooperation and mutual understanding. The other delegates continued to ignore him, never suspecting that humanity was planning to solve the problem in their own way. The irony was not lost on Jake. The council had spent years treating humans as if they were invisible. Soon they would get their wish. Humanity would disappear from council space entirely, but they would leave quietly, with dignity, taking their knowledge and skills with them. The council would get exactly what they had always wanted: a galaxy without humans bothering them with inconvenient questions. Jake wondered how long it would take them to realize what they had lost. Dr. Tony Clark walked through the corridors of the Interspecies Technology Institute for what he knew would be the last time. He carried a simple bag with his personal items and a data storage device hidden in his jacket pocket. 20 years of research and development were stored on that device. Not stolen research, but work that humans had contributed to joint projects. Tony had helped design the quantum computers that ran most of the galaxy's major systems. His human perspective on problem-solving had led to breakthroughs that other species had struggled with for decades. The Voss were brilliant with theory, but humans had a talent for making things actually work. His resignation letter sat on his supervisor's desk. It gave standard reasons about family obligations and career changes. It did not mention the real reason: Tony was tired of watching alien colleagues take credit for human innovations while treating humans like junior partners. As he passed the main laboratory, Tony saw Dr. Veltar, his Voss colleague, working on a project they had developed together. Veltar had always been polite to Tony, but in the way someone might be polite to a useful assistant. Now Veltar would have to solve the complex problems on his own. Tony wondered how long it would take. 3 levels down, Mary Johnson was completing her final inspection of the power systems she had designed for the station. The systems were works of art, elegant solutions to complex engineering problems. They provided power to over 2 million beings living and working on the massive facility. Mary had learned her engineering in the harsh environments of frontier worlds, where systems had to work perfectly or people died. That experience had taught her to build redundancies that other engineers missed. Her systems were not just efficient, they were nearly impossible to break. The Cathari engineer who would replace her stood beside her, taking notes as Mary explained the maintenance procedures. Corthell was competent enough, but he had learned engineering in controlled environments where help was always available. He did not understand the philosophy behind Mary's designs. The main thing to remember, Mary said, is that every system has 3 backup systems. If something fails, do not just fix it. Figure out why it failed and make sure it cannot happen again. Corthell nodded, but Mary could see he did not really understand. He was thinking like most alien engineers. Fix the problem and move on. Mary thought like a human engineer. Fix the problem, then fix the thing that caused the problem, then fix the thing that might cause a similar problem in the future. On the agricultural levels of the station, Steve Wilson was packing up his office in the Interspecies Agricultural Division. Steve had spent 15 years developing new farming techniques that could work on hostile worlds. His methods had turned dead rocks into fertile farmland across dozens of star systems. The work had started as necessity. Human colonies were often established on worlds that other species considered worthless. Humans had to learn to grow food in toxic soil, under radiation-heavy suns, in atmospheres that would kill most plants. Steve had turned that desperation into innovation. His replacement was a Zilani scientist named Jithara, who had impressive credentials from the best agricultural universities in the galaxy. She had studied farming in ideal conditions on garden worlds. Steve doubted she would last a month trying to grow crops in the real conditions that frontier farmers faced. Steve left behind detailed manuals and instructional videos. He was not vindictive. If Jithara could learn from his work, more beings would have food. But the manuals could not teach the instincts that came from years of failure and success in impossible conditions. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds and stations. Dr. Nathan Foster submitted his resignation from the Hostile Environment Research Center. Nathan had developed the survival techniques that allowed beings to work on worlds that should have been uninhabitable. His methods had saved thousands of lives in mining operations, research expeditions, and emergency situations. Nathan had learned survival not from books, but from necessity. Humans had colonized worlds that other species avoided. They had learned to survive in environments that ranged from ice worlds, where the air froze, to desert planets where metal melted in the sun. That experience had made Nathan the galaxy's leading expert on staying alive in impossible places. His replacement was a committee of scientists from 3 different species. They were all brilliant theorists who had studied hostile environments from the safety of climate-controlled laboratories. Nathan wished them luck. They would need it. Engineer Julie Martinez finished her last shift maintaining the life support systems for the Council's primary meeting station. Julie had designed these systems herself, using techniques developed for human colony ships that had to operate perfectly for years without maintenance. The systems were more complex than they appeared. Julie had built in automated repair functions, predictive maintenance protocols, and emergency backups that would kick in under conditions other engineers had never imagined. She had learned to think like a human colonist. What could go wrong, and how could she prevent it from killing everyone? Her replacement was a team of Voss technicians who were impressed by the sophistication of her designs. They spent hours asking questions about the automated systems, the backup protocols, the emergency procedures. Julie answered everything patiently. But she knew they were thinking about the systems the wrong way. The Voss approached engineering like a mathematical problem to be solved. Humans approached it like a survival challenge to be overcome. The difference mattered more than most beings realized. Captain Carol Davis commanded one of the largest human merchant fleets in the galaxy. Her ships carried goods between worlds that other traders considered too risky or unprofitable to serve. Carol had built her business by going where others would not go and doing jobs others would not take. Carol's ships used modified human designs that were built for reliability rather than speed or comfort. They could operate in nebulae that scrambled most navigation systems. They could land on worlds with hostile atmospheres. They could carry cargo that other species considered too dangerous to transport. Now, Carol was redirecting her entire fleet toward the Outer Rim territories. Officially, she was pursuing new business opportunities. In reality, she was positioning her ships to support the human colonies when they cut ties with Council Space. Other human traders were doing the same thing. The galaxy's most extensive shipping network was quietly reorganizing itself to serve human interests rather than Council Commerce. Dr. Rachel Green published her final research paper on stellar cartography before submitting her resignation from the Galactic Navigation Institute. Rachel had mapped hyperspace routes through regions that other species considered impossible to navigate. Her charts had opened entire sectors of space to exploration and development. Rachel had developed her techniques mapping routes between human colonies scattered across the galaxy's most dangerous regions. She had learned to find paths through gravitational anomalies, stellar radiation fields, and spatial distortions that would destroy most ships. Her charts were works of genius that made the impossible routine. The Navigation Institute had dozens of skilled astronomers and mathematicians, but none of them had Rachel's intuitive understanding of hyperspace navigation. They could follow her charts, but they could not create new ones using her methods. Rachel's departure left the Institute with detailed maps of known routes, but no way to extend them into unexplored regions. The galaxy had just become a much larger and more dangerous place. As the exodus continued, patterns became clear to those who knew what to look for. Humans were not just leaving their jobs. They were taking with them the practical knowledge and hard-won experience that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. The beings replacing them were often more educated and better credentialed than the humans they replaced. But education and credentials were not the same as experience. The humans had learned their skills in the hardest school possible, the frontier worlds, where mistakes meant death and success required innovation. That difference was about to become very important. Director Yithmos of the Galactic Trade Commission stared at the report on his desk for the 5th time. The numbers were getting worse every week. Shipping delays had increased by 40% across 17 sectors. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were now experiencing constant problems. Yithmos was a Zalani, a species known for their skill with mathematics and logistics. He had run galactic trade operations for over 20 years. He had never seen disruptions like this spread so quickly across so many different regions. The problems had started small. A few missed deliveries here and there. Some delays in the Outer Rim territories. Nothing that seemed connected or significant. But now the pattern was clear, and it was getting worse every day. His assistant, Drawlin, entered with another stack of incident reports. The Cathari Mining Consortium is reporting severe delays in equipment deliveries to their operations in the Void Nebula, she said. The transport company says they can no longer guarantee safe passage through that region. Yithmos frowned. Which transport company? They were using Wilson Freight Services. But Wilson terminated their contracts 3 months ago. The replacement company lost 2 ships last week trying to navigate the nebula routes. That name was familiar. Yithmos searched through his files and found the contract records. Wilson Freight had been handling dangerous route deliveries for over 15 years without a single loss. Their safety record had been perfect. Why did Wilson terminate the contracts? He asked. The company dissolved, Drawlin replied. The owner, Carol Davis, retired and sold off all the ships to private buyers. Ythmos made a note to investigate further. One company dissolving was normal business. But if other specialized transport services were also disappearing, that could explain the shipping problems. 2 levels down from the Trade Commission offices, Dr. Kelvick struggled with a crisis that was beyond his understanding. Kelvick was the Voss replacement for Dr. Nathan Foster at the Hostile Environment Research Center. He had 3 degrees in environmental science and had published dozens of research papers. What he did not have was any idea how to help the mining crew trapped on Zarian Prime. Zarian Prime was a toxic world where the atmosphere could dissolve most metals and the radiation levels were high enough to kill most species within hours. A Cathari mining operation, and there had suffered equipment failures that left 20 workers stranded on the surface. Dr. Foster had developed the survival protocols for operations on worlds like Zarian Prime. His techniques had saved hundreds of lives over the years. But Foster was gone, and his replacement had no experience with real survival situations. Kelvick had Foster's manuals and instructional videos, but the manuals assumed knowledge that Kelvick did not have. They talked about reading the environment and adapting to local conditions in ways that made no sense to someone who had learned environmental science in a classroom. The mining crew had been trapped for 18 hours. Their emergency shelter was failing. Kelvick's theoretical knowledge told him they should evacuate immediately. But the evacuation procedures required someone who understood how to operate in hostile environments, and that person was no longer available. Kelvick sent an emergency message to the Hostile Environment Research Center's main office, requesting any available expert who had worked with Dr. Foster. The reply came back quickly. All the human staff had resigned over the past few months. No one else had Foster's level of experience with extreme survival situations. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Ceres Delta, disaster was spreading through the farming colonies. The world had been transformed from barren rock to fertile farmland using techniques developed by Steve Wilson and other human agricultural specialists. The crops were dying. Jithara, Wilson's replacement, stood in the middle of a field that should have been green with growing plants. Instead, the soil was turning gray and nothing would grow. The automated systems were functioning normally. The chemical composition of the soil was within acceptable parameters. By every measure she understood, the farm should be thriving. But it was not. Jithara had degrees from the finest agricultural universities in the galaxy. She understood plant biology, soil chemistry, and climate management better than most beings alive. What she did not understand was why Steve Wilson's farming methods had worked when hers did not. Wilson had developed his techniques through years of trial and error on worlds that should not have supported life. He had learned to work with hostile soil, poisonous atmospheres, and radiation levels that would kill normal plants. His methods were not just about science. They were about understanding how life could adapt to impossible conditions. JITR's methods came from textbooks written about farming in ideal conditions. They assumed fertile soil, clean air, and stable weather. Ceres Delta had none of those things. It had been made livable through Wilson's innovations that Jithara could not replicate. The failure was spreading to other worlds. Farm colonies across 12 systems were reporting crop failures. Food shortages were beginning to appear in major population centers. The Galactic Food Distribution Network was scrambling to find alternative sources, but there were no alternatives. Human farming techniques had been the only way to make hostile worlds productive. On the council station, Maintenance Chief Corthell faced his own crisis. The power systems designed by Mary Johnson were experiencing failures that should have been impossible. According to the technical specifications, the systems had multiple backup protocols that would prevent any serious problems, but the backups were not working the way they were supposed to. Corthell had studied Johnson's designs extensively. He understood the basic principles and could perform routine maintenance. What he did not understand was the philosophy behind the designs. Johnson had built her systems to expect the unexpected. Every component was designed to fail safely and trigger alternative systems. The problem was that Corthell did not know which alternatives would trigger under which conditions. Johnson's notes talked about cascade failure protocols and adaptive load management in ways that assumed understanding of principles she had never written down. The failures were small so far: brief power fluctuations, temporary system resets, nothing dangerous yet. But Corthell could see the pattern developing. The systems were slowly degrading without Johnson's expertise to guide the maintenance. If the degradation continued, the station could lose power entirely. 2 million beings lived and worked on the Council Station. Without power, life support would fail, and the station would become uninhabitable within hours. Similar problems were developing across the galaxy. The quantum computers designed by Tony Clark were experiencing processing errors that slowed down communications between star systems. The life support systems engineered by Julie Martinez were showing signs of stress that their automated diagnostics could not identify. The hyperspace navigation charts created by Rachel Green were becoming unreliable as stellar conditions changed. In unmapped regions, ships were getting lost trying to follow routes that had been safe for years. Each problem seemed small and isolated, but together they were beginning to threaten the basic infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. In his office on the Council Station, Ambassador Jake Miller received daily reports about the growing problems. The reports did not mention humans or connect the failures to the ongoing exodus. The various species were still trying to solve each crisis independently. They had not yet realized that all the problems had the same cause: the loss of human knowledge and experience that had become essential to the operation of galactic society. Jake wondered how long it would take them to figure it out. The humans had been so thoroughly dismissed and ignored that most aliens had never noticed how much they contributed. Now that contribution was disappearing and the galaxy was starting to fall apart, but it was still falling apart slowly. The real crisis was yet to come. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called after the Zarian Prime disaster. 20 Cathari miners had died when their emergency shelter failed, and no one had been able to help them. The rescue mission had turned into a body recovery. Operation. Council Chairman Zorthak looked around the great chamber at the assembled delegates. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their traditional seats, but one section remained conspicuously empty. The human delegation seats had been vacant for months, but no one had paid much attention until now. We face multiple crises across 17 sectors, Zorthak announced. Food shortages, communication failures, transportation breakdowns, infrastructure collapses. These problems are spreading faster than our response teams can address them. The Voss delegate Morgeth stood to speak. The quantum communication network has experienced a 60% decrease in efficiency over the past 6 months. Our technicians cannot identify the source of the degradation. The agricultural crisis is worse, added the Zalani representative Felinara. 12 farming worlds have reported total crop failures. Food riots have begun on 3 major population centers. Cathari delegate Zexthal, who had often mocked human diplomatic efforts, looked genuinely worried for the first time in years. Our mining operations in hostile environments have suffered catastrophic losses. We have lost 4 facilities and over 100 workers in the past month alone. Director Yithmo stood from his position in the administrative section. The trade disruptions are approaching crisis levels. Major shipping routes that have operated for decades are now too dangerous for most transport companies to use. As the reports continued, a pattern began to emerge that no one wanted to acknowledge. The problems were not random. They were concentrated in areas where humans had been heavily involved. Council Security Chief Valthan of the Mortai hegemony was the first to speak the obvious truth. These failures are occurring in sectors and systems where human personnel were previously assigned. The correlation is too strong to be coincidence. The chamber fell silent. For years, the Council had treated humans as minor players in Galactic. Affairs useful for dangerous or unpleasant jobs, but not essential to the functioning of civilization. Now they were being forced to confront the possibility that they had been wrong. "Where are the humans now?" Zorthak asked. It was a simple question with no simple answer. Ambassador Veltar of the Andorian Union had been tasked with maintaining diplomatic contact with human colonies. He stood slowly, clearly uncomfortable with what he had to report. "We have lost contact with most human settlements in the Outer Rim territories," he said. "Their colonies appear to have been abandoned. We have found no trace of where the population relocated." "What do you mean, no trace?" demanded Zexthal. "I mean they removed all evidence of their destination. Equipment was salvaged or destroyed. Computer systems were wiped clean. Navigation records were deleted. They left nothing behind that would indicate where they went." The implications were staggering. Entire human populations had simply vanished without leaving any clues about their destination. It was as if hundreds of thousands of people had decided to disappear from the galaxy entirely. "This is impossible," Morgeth said. "Populations that large cannot simply vanish. They must have left some trace." Valthan stepped forward. "My security teams have investigated extensively. The humans were extremely thorough. They appeared to have planned this exodus over many months, possibly years. Every trace of their destination has been eliminated." Director Yithmos consulted his datapad. According to shipping records, human transport vessels began changing their routes approximately 18 months ago. At the time, it appeared to be normal business adjustments. Now it seems it was part of a coordinated withdrawal. The realization was settling over the chamber like a heavy weight. The humans had not simply left on impulse. They had planned their departure carefully and executed it with precision. They had removed themselves from galactic society so completely that finding them might be impossible. "We need to locate them," Zorthak declared. "The current crisis demonstrates that human expertise is essential to maintaining galactic stability. We must convince them to return." It was the first time in galactic history that the Council had officially acknowledged that humans were essential to anything. The search began immediately. Council fleets were dispatched to every known human colony. Site. Investigation teams scoured abandoned settlements for any clue about where the populations had gone. Communication specialists broadcast messages into deep space, hoping to contact human ships. The results were disappointing. The humans had been incredibly thorough in covering their tracks. They had taken or destroyed everything of value and left behind only empty buildings and cleared land. Computer systems contained no useful data. Even garbage dumps had been cleaned out. Commander Zeth Al led one of the largest search operations. Investigating the former human colony of New Haven, the colony had supported 50,000 people and had been one of the most successful agricultural settlements in the Outer Rim. What Zethal found was an empty shell. The buildings were intact but completely stripped of equipment. The farms had been harvested one final time, then left to return to their natural state. Even the orbital facilities had been dismantled and removed. "It is like they were never here," Zethal reported back to the Council. "Except for the empty buildings, there is no evidence that this world ever supported a large population." Similar reports came in from other search teams. The humans had not simply moved to new locations. They had erased their presence from the galaxy as thoroughly as possible. Dr. Kelvik, still struggling with hostile environment emergencies, suggested a different approach. "Perhaps we can contact human individuals who left their positions recently. They might be willing to return if we offer proper compensation." The Council authorized generous offers to former human employees, triple salary increases, advanced positions, better working conditions. Messages were sent to the last known addresses of key personnel like Dr. Nathan Foster, Engineer Mary Johnson, and Dr. Tony Clark. The messages bounced back as undeliverable. The humans had not simply changed jobs. They had disappeared entirely from the galactic communication network. "This level of coordination suggests central planning," observed Morgeth. "Someone organized this exodus. If we can identify the leadership, perhaps we can negotiate." The investigation focused on known human leaders and diplomats. Ambassador Jake Miller was an obvious candidate, but he had maintained his position throughout the crisis. His diplomatic communications showed no sign of involvement in any organized withdrawal. Other prominent humans were similarly investigated. Colonial administrators, military leaders, business executives. But the investigation revealed that many of these individuals had also disappeared without trace. As the search continued, the galactic crisis deepened. Without human agricultural expertise, food shortages spread to dozens of worlds. Without human navigation specialists, shipping became increasingly dangerous and unreliable. Without human engineers, critical infrastructure began failing across multiple sectors. The Zarian Prime disaster was followed by similar tragedies. A research station was lost when its life support systems failed without proper maintenance. A mining platform exploded when safety protocols developed by human engineers were not properly followed. 3 cargo ships vanished in hyperspace when they attempted to use routes that required human navigation techniques. Each incident drove home the same point: the humans had taken with them knowledge and skills that other species could not easily replace. The galaxy had become dependent on human expertise without ever acknowledging that dependence. In his private office, Jake Miller read the daily reports with mixed feelings. He felt sympathy for the beings who were suffering because of infrastructure failures. But he also felt a quiet satisfaction that humanity's worth was finally being recognized. The irony was bitter. For years, humans had been treated as expendable, workers suitable only for dangerous or unpleasant jobs. Now those same jobs were proving essential to galactic civilization, and no one else could do them properly. The Council was finally learning what humans had always known: sometimes the most important work is done by people no one notices until they are gone. The Council Station's main communication array came alive with an incoming signal after 3 months of desperate searching. The transmission was clean and clear, originating from somewhere beyond the mapped regions of Council space. The message was simple: a human ship requesting permission to dock. Council Chairman Zorthak rushed to the docking bay personally, bringing with him the senior delegates from every major species. They had been searching the galaxy for any trace of human presence, and now humans were coming to them. The ship that emerged from hyperspace was unlike any human vessel they had seen before. It was larger and more advanced than typical human designs, with hull modifications that suggested it was built for long-range exploration in dangerous regions. The name painted on its side read New Frontier. Captain Joe Wilson stepped off the ship wearing a simple uniform without any council insignia or rank markers. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Behind him came 2 other humans, Dr. Amy Clark and Dr. Rick Harris. Zorthak stepped forward with what he hoped was a welcoming expression. "Captain Wilson, we are grateful for your arrival. The Council has been eager to re-establish contact with human representatives." Joe nodded politely. "I received your messages. I understand you have been experiencing some difficulties." The understatement was almost insulting. Half the galaxy was facing infrastructure collapse, food shortages, and communication breakdowns. Difficulties was hardly the word for it. "Perhaps we could discuss the situation in more comfortable surroundings," Zorthak suggested, gesturing toward the council chambers. "That won't be necessary," Joe replied. "I'm not here to rejoin the council or negotiate humanity's return to council space. I'm here to offer humanitarian assistance." The words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. For months, they had assumed that once they found humans, they could convince them to return. The possibility that humans might refuse had not seriously been considered. Zexthal, the Kethari delegate who had once laughed at human diplomatic efforts, stepped forward urgently. "Captain Wilson, you must understand the severity of the crisis. Without human expertise, critical systems across the galaxy are failing. Lives are being lost." "I do understand," Joe said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Dr. Amy Clark opened a carrying case and removed several data storage devices. These contain updated maintenance protocols for quantum communication systems, power distribution networks, and life support infrastructure. The information should help you stabilize your current problems. Dr. Rick Harris added his own contribution. I've prepared medical treatment guidelines for the mining accident injuries and toxic exposure cases that have been increasing. The techniques should reduce casualties until you can develop your own expertise. The generosity was unexpected and somehow made the situation more painful. The humans were offering help freely, without conditions or demands for recognition. It was the behavior of a superior civilization assisting a struggling one, not the response of dismissed workers seeking revenge. This assistance is appreciated, Morgeth said carefully, but surely you realize that these are temporary solutions. The long-term stability of galactic civilization requires human participation. Joe's expression remained neutral. Galactic civilization functioned for thousands of years before humans achieved spaceflight. I'm sure you'll adapt. But not efficiently, Director Ythmos interjected. Human innovations increased productivity and safety across every sector. Without that expertise, we face economic collapse and massive loss of life. Then you'll need to develop new expertise, Joe replied. Humans learned to survive and thrive in hostile environments because we had to. Other species can learn the same skills if they're willing to do the work. The calm certainty in his voice was infuriating and impressive at the same time. Joe Wilson spoke like someone who had moved beyond the need for validation or recognition. He was offering help because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted anything in return. Ambassador Veltar tried a different approach. Captain Wilson, surely you understand that cooperation benefits everyone. Humans and other species working together achieved more than any group could alone. That's true, Joe agreed. But cooperation requires mutual respect. For too many years, humans were treated as useful tools rather than equal partners. That kind of relationship isn't sustainable. Zorthak felt his patience running out. What would it take for humans to return to council space? Better representation? Improved trade agreements? Full voting rights in council decisions? Joe was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. The problem isn't political representation or economic benefits. The problem is cultural attitude. For years, humans were dismissed as primitive upstarts who got lucky with technology. That attitude hasn't changed. But it has changed, Zexthil protested. The current crisis has demonstrated humanity's essential contributions to galactic civilization. That recognition will be reflected in future policies. Recognition born from desperation isn't the same as respect, Joe replied. You acknowledge human contributions now because you need us. What happens when the crisis passes and you no longer feel that need? The question hung in the air unanswered because everyone knew the truth. Once the immediate problems were solved, the old attitudes would likely return. The galaxy would go back to treating humans as useful but unimportant, until the next crisis proved otherwise. Dr. Amy Clark spoke up. The technical information we're providing should give you several years to develop alternative solutions. Humans aren't the only species capable of innovation. You just need to be willing to learn from difficult experience instead of relying on theoretical knowledge. Where will you go? Morgeth asked. What will humans do beyond council space? Joe smiled for the first time since arriving. We found worlds that other species consider uninhabitable. Places where the environment is too harsh, the resources too difficult to extract, the conditions too dangerous for normal settlement. They're perfect for us. You're condemning your species to survival on marginal worlds, Valthan said. Surely. That's not preferable to productive membership in galactic society. Those marginal worlds are turning out to be quite productive, Dr. Rick Harris said. When you're forced to innovate or die, you become very good at innovation. Human colonies are developing technologies and techniques that make our previous work look primitive. The implication was clear. Humans weren't retreating to scratch out a bare existence on hostile worlds. They were building something new and potentially superior to what they were leaving behind. The offer to return stands permanently, Zorthak said desperately. If humans ever reconsider, The Council will welcome you back with full honors and recognition. Joe nodded respectfully. I'll make sure that message reaches our leadership. But I wouldn't expect a positive response. Humans have learned to value their independence. As the three humans prepared to leave, Joe paused at the entrance to their ship. The technical assistance we're providing comes with no obligations. Use it to solve your current problems and develop your own capabilities. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to find our own paths. The ship departed as quietly as it had arrived, disappearing into hyperspace toward regions that remained unmapped and unexplored. The humans had made their choice clear. They were moving forward without the Council, not waiting for the Council to catch up with them. In the weeks that followed, the technical assistance proved invaluable. The maintenance protocols stabilized critical systems across dozens of worlds. The medical treatments saved hundreds of lives. The crisis began to ease as other species worked desperately to replace human expertise with their own innovations. But the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. The beings they had dismissed as primitive had been the foundation holding their civilization together. Now those beings were gone, building something new in the vast unexplored regions beyond Council space. The Council had gotten exactly what they had always seemed to want: a galaxy without humans bothering them with inconvenient questions or competing for resources. They had just learned too late that they had never really wanted that at all.